Welcome to EMDR with Alice. So recently I was with a consultation group and I had this inspiration to talk about the process of disconnection that happens in trauma and talking about it specifically in the context of dissociation and fragmentation. So in your EMDR basic training, we recommend that you do the DES with all your clients. And then if you've done any of my trainings, you've also heard that if they score high on that, the next step is the mid, and doing the mid assessment for diagnosing of the specific dissociation disorder. And so I think it's important to talk about how to prep clients for those assessments and what they can expect. Because oftentimes if you're working with a client who has a high level of dissociation, it can be really jarring when they begin to get those results and see the level of disconnect. So one way that we can begin to prep them is by talking about the process of disconnection that happens with trauma. If there's significant trauma, especially early childhood trauma, and especially at the hands of caregivers that's repetitive and pervasive, then the appropriate response that our nervous system has and that the client has for self-preservation is to begin to disconnect from self. The more severe the abuse, the more severe the neglect, the bigger the disconnection that takes place. And the disconnection happens kind of pervasively throughout their system, but also incrementally from different incidences and different parts of self. And that's where that fragmentation process comes from. This is a gross kind of overgeneralization as I'm talking about it, because I'm just doing a real short talk on this process. But beginning to introduce that concept to clients of that disconnection and how it was absolutely necessary and absolutely essential for their survival and absolutely appropriate. And part of the healing journey, or a big part of the healing journey, is beginning to reconnect. And the process of reconnection can be very scary, especially if there's a high level of disconnection that's happened as part of the survival steps. Right? And so beginning to introduce clients to the concept of disconnection and then helping prepare them for what reconnection may be like. The last time that they were connected to self was overwhelming, was painful. And so as they begin to reconnect to self, they may get triggered into those feelings of being overwhelmed and feeling like it's too much, and the urge to disconnect, because that's what's stored in the nervous system and in those maladaptive networks. Because the last time that they were connected to self, again, they were experiencing something that was overwhelming. So what's stored in those memory networks are the feelings of overwhelm, the feelings of the urge to disconnect. So we begin to bring that AIP language to clients as we're introducing them to what they can expect as they begin to reconnect. One of the first steps of reconnecting is when they begin to take these assessments, they begin to realize the level of disconnect. And so that realization brings this awareness into the present moment, which begins to connect them to themselves in the present moment. And that awareness in and of itself can be overwhelming. It can be scary and it can feel like too much. And again, if we go back within that framework of the EMDR lens that we look through, recognizing that awareness and connecting to the present moment and the awareness of the truth can feel overwhelming, because what's stored in the connection, right, is overwhelm and the feeling like it's too much. And so we begin to use that AIP language with them as we're preparing them for taking these assessments and what they may expect, that they may feel or experience as they begin to see the results. And then we talk about the journey then afterwards, right? As we begin to get these results, we begin to understand the level of disconnect. The process of reconnecting can be hard and painful, but let's remember we're doing it from a place that's different from when we had to disconnect in the first place. So we're beginning to reconnect in a different place, in your life. You have different resources available to you now that you didn't have available to you then at the time of disconnection. And so while connection felt really overwhelming and too much at one stage of your life, now in your present life, you might get triggered into these feelings, but the truth is that you have more available to you now. You've lived more life, your brain has developed more, and you have more resources available to you now that you didn't have then. And so as we begin the process of reconnecting, realizing the triggering that's going to happen is old feelings of overwhelm, old feelings of it being too much and the pain being too much. But now you have tools, and we're going to learn even more tools that are going to help you for when you begin the process of reconnecting, you're able to be with it in a different way that you never could be with it before. And so remembering when we're beginning to work with clients and give these assessments, understanding the nature of disconnection, especially when we're working with complex trauma, preparing clients for what they can expect, what they might expect, what could come up, what could be triggered, and then what's the path ahead? The path ahead, the healing journey looks like connection, and that connection can feel overwhelming and it can feel like too much because of the way that it's stored in the nervous system. And we're going to be learning the tools to be able to manage the connection, and it feels safe now to be able to reconnect to yourself and connect back to your true self and who you were always meant to be in the world. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to working with you and seeing you in the future.